Good evening. Welcome back to PBE Rewind. I'm your host, I.O. Torn, and we got a great show for you this week. We just completed the AllStar game and week 3, moving into the second half of the Pro Baseball Experience Season 24. So let's take a quick look at where the standings lie after 3 weeks. Over in the East, the Outer Banks Aviators are 53-28, still at the top of the division, with the New Orleans Rougarous and defending champs 5 games back at 48-33. The New York Voyagers are currently holding on to a playoff spot at third place, 43-38, with the Indianapolis Apex 1 game back behind them, 42-39, attempting to try to get that first ever playoff berth. Sarasota Supernova are falling way back now at 33-48, 20 games out of first, with Providence Crabs at 29-52 and the Cancun Toros at 24-57. Over in the Western Division, we have the Nashville Stars at the top of the league, 55-26, 6 games behind them. We have the defending West champs, San Antonio Sloss, 49-32, and tied with them is another mainstay in the West, the Death Valley Scorpions, at 49-32. The Detroit Demons are hanging in there at 42-39, 13 games back, with the Vancouver Vandals still hanging in as well, 40-41, 15 games back. Boise Raptors are 37-44, and the Kashima Foxes are 23-58. With the majority of this division still fighting it out there in the middle, it's really tough to see who will come out alive for the playoffs, but it's a pretty exciting division, to say the least. All right, before we move any further into the second half of the season in Week 3, let's go ahead and recap the All-Star game, as it was a pretty great game. And with us for that, we have, for his first time ever on the PBE Rewind, we have The Bill. The Bill, what do you got for me with this All-Star game from Season 24?
Hello everyone, my name is Bill the Hill, and I'm here for your 2040 All-Star Game recap. The 2040 All-Star Game was one to watch as the East and West went at it once again like they do every year. The action started early as Zach Johnson smashes a ball to the outfield for an easy double on the first at bat of the game. But Savart strands him on third to end the inning. Frederick Garcia puts on a 9-pitch clinic to end the bottom of the first, and we head to the top of the second where the West puts up no fight. The action picked back up in the bottom of the second though, as the East starts off with a single by Halen, another single by Bonanza, puts the East first runner in scoring position. A wild pitch puts them on second and third with 2 outs, but Riverboat cannot capitalize. The West comes back up in the third, and the player who got this game started gets this inning going with a deep drive to left center field for the first score of the day. Esso decided that they would not be shown up and blasted another one to left center, just barely clearing the wall this time, but nonetheless the West go back to back and we're on top early. The East, not wanting to fall behind early in the game, gets the bases loaded with 2 outs in the bottom of the third. Richie Bonanza steps up to the plate and on a 1-1 count sends this ball to the outfield on a rope. Bonanza takes and slams the bat on the ground as the East takes the lead with a grand salami, boys and girls. Moving on to the top of the fourth, the West wants that lead back and will get it after Bushwell takes the first pitch in the at-bat and sends the ball deep into the right field bleachers. Bottom of the fourth, and the game had a bunch of home runs already. The East decided they wanted to switch it up and play some small ball, with a single and then a double, and then a single by Johnny Times II. And this game is now 5-6 for the East. The West still wants to play with the long ball as San Antonio hits a solo shot to the right field and make this game 6-6. The game gets quiet until the bottom of the 8th when the Tom Shue steps up and hits a deep go-ahead home run to take the 6-7 lead over the West. Jose 43 comes in and gets 3 strikeouts to end the 2040 All-Star Game. The slugfest by the West can't keep up with the slugfest by the East as this game ended 6-7. The player of the game was Richie Bonanza, who had 2 hits and 4 RBIs with a home run.
Thank you, The Bill, for recapping that game. That was an absolute slugfest. I mean, both teams showed up to play. The hitters did, at least. Maybe not the pitching so much, but an exciting all-star game, to say the least. All right, now we're going to move into probably maybe the hottest topic in PBE, getting closer to the postseason, and that is the MVP race, or the most valuable player in PBE. So I'm going to get it over to Geronimo Shiderme, who breaks it down for us. What do you got for him, Geronimo?
And welcome in, or welcome back to the Stat Room. I'm Geronimo Shiderme. This week, I want to talk about the Season 24 MVP race, at least for the position players. Unfortunately, pitchers, you guys confuse me, and you fall outside my area of expertise, so I'm not going to cover you here today. Sorry. I want to start in the same place I start almost all of these segments, and that's with the list of the team leaders and runs accounted for. Runs accounted for is just runs batted in plus runs you've scored. Anthony Bauer here has an asterisk, which he will on every single list he shows up on this week, because he is a special case. He was traded from Cancun to Indianapolis in the middle of the season, so his numbers are not all for Indianapolis, even though it might seem that way based on this chart. Just as long as you keep the proper context, I think he has every right to be in this list, and I'll tell you why real quick. He accounted for 49 runs in just 46 games with Cancun, which is very good and would probably have landed on this list. But he actually accounted for 60 runs in just 36 games since being traded. And if he had kept that pace for all 81 games and he'd played all 81 games with Indianapolis, he would have 135 runs accounted for right now. So I think it's more than fair to leave him on this list with his value of 109, even though those were not all for Indianapolis. Moving on. If you've seen my segments before, you know I love to calculate runs accounted for as a percentage of the team runs that you play for. So with that in mind, here's the list sorted by the percentage of your team runs. This would indicate that Herb Sessions has either scored or batted in 35% of all of the runs that Vancouver has scored this season, and so on down the list. Now I want to do something this week that I haven't done in the past, and that's further develop this metric to include defense. Now there's a lot of ways we could do that, so let me explain to you my method. Zone rating is the best defensive metric we have easy access to from OOTP. Now I need to make a correction, because last week I said that zone rating was a measure of outs above average, which is not true. I've since discovered that zone rating from OOTP is based on Fangraph's ultimate zone rating, which is a measure of runs saved. It is not a measure of outs, it is a measure of runs saved. So since we have access to a metric that easily tells us how many runs you've saved defensively, we should factor that into this metric. However, we can't just simply add zone rating to the runs accounted for in order to find the total runs that both your offense and your defense accounted for, because zone rating is a measure based on the average fielder at your position, and as we all know, the average shortstop is still better than most left fielders. Since we're using zone rating, which is based on Fangraph's ultimate zone rating, in order to make a positional adjustment, I think we should use Fangraph's positional adjustments. These are based on 162 games, which is very convenient because we've played 81, so we can just divide these in half and we see how many runs we need to add or subtract from each player's zone rating in order to get the actual total number of runs they saved when you adjust for the difficulty of their position. So, take the runs accounted for on offense, add the zone rating, add or subtract the positional adjustment, and you get the total runs accounted for, which includes their offensive and defensive contributions. Now, if we sort all 14 of these players by the percentage of their team runs they've accounted for now, we get this list. First basemen like Anthony Bauer fall down the list, while Scott Poe, an incredible left fielder, moves up the list. If you feel like this list is missing some context, and you'd like to see the individual players' zone ratings or their positions, here you go. Herb Sessions, who is at the very top of this list, is somehow the only player on the list to have a negative zone rating, but to be fair, he does play shortstop, a very demanding position. By this list, it does look like Herb Sessions might be the number one MVP candidate, but you might dock him for being the only player here to not even be average at his defensive position. You might dock Hardin Long for playing on the same team as Tom Shue, who almost somehow has as many runs accounted for as he does, even though he is accounted for over 30% of all the runs on the team. You might do the same to Scott Poe because he plays with Bobby McDonald, but then again, you might not, since even with those incredible players on the roster, these guys are still accounting for such a large portion of their team's offense. If you'd like to be a traditional MVP voter and only worry about those players who are currently on a playoff team, I can show you the division standings. Hardin Long, Scott Poe, and Dub City are the best players by my metric that are currently on a playoff team, as Herb Sessions and Red Arrow are not. And because of this, my vote for Season 24 MVP, at least for the position players, would go to Hardin Long right now. I'm sorry to have left you out this week, pitchers, but I'm going to study up and learn more about pitching metrics and how to evaluate your position so that I can include all PBE players in the future. If you have any questions or comments for me, please reach out to me on the forum, on YouTube, or on Twitter, and I will talk to you guys next week.
Thank you, Geronimo. I like putting you in the middle of our episodes so that, when the people that vote on MVP, they want to cheat a little bit and watch all your research and look into so they can make their votes. They have to at least watch part of our episode each week. Well, anyway, let's That's it for the MVP race. Let's move into the next exciting segment, and that is the minor league rewind with Sam. Sam, what do you got for me breaking down the first 3 weeks of the minor leagues?
It's the week. What week, you ask? Playoff push week. 'Tis the season where minor league players and alumni watch in agony, anticipation, and great interest as the playoff window slowly closes for some teams. Now, this time last season, it was a much closer race than it is this season, so I won't be covering the entirety of the MIL PBE like I did last time, but don't get me wrong, the playoff race is still definitely a close one, and one you'll definitely want to follow. I'll divide this list of teams into 3 tiers: the lock, the advantage holders, and the outsiders. Now, the lock is one team. It's the only team that has pretty much clinched a spot in the playoffs, and I'll leave you to decide which team that is. The advantage holders are the teams who are currently in the playoffs, or at least have a playoff spot, but shouldn't get complacent in their spot, and the outsiders are the people just outside of the playoff window who have a feasible chance of making it. Let's start with the one and only lock, the San Bernardino 66ers. In a move that should surprise nobody, the 66ers are the most dominant team in the minors for the second season in a row. And unless something astronomically terrible happens with OOTP, the 66ers are in. With top performers Bongo Luongo, miles ahead Danny Sullivan, and Bill the Hill being absolute studs on the field, the team is almost destined for a ring. Hopefully. May the sim gods have mercy on the 66ers' soul. Now we get to the advantage holders. First up are the 48-win Chicago Kingpins. Chicago. It's a pretty nice city, and one that I actually really enjoy. And they have a pretty gosh dang good chance at making the playoffs. They lead the Eastern Division and have a pretty solid roster, with Muzi and Dag doing a really good job building their team from underdogs into legit contenders. Scary Terry, Pork Chop Sandwiches, Tony Gunk, Barry B. Benson, and the Crush Brothers are all doing really well this season. And it truly is a sight to behold this Chi-Town team in action. The Kingpins are 5 games ahead, so they have a bit of a cushion, but you know how the minors are. The sim is a fickle mistress. Next up are the 2 teams tied for 3rd in the playoffs, the Dallas Dynamos and the Anchorage Wheelers. The Dynamos have been doing quite well this season, and they truly are a sight to behold. The batting side of things is pretty much dominated by Giannis Krustis, I'm pretty sure that's how it's pronounced, who leads the team in batting average, dingers, and RBI. And on the pitching side of things, Michael Knightrider leads with wins and strikeouts, and Grimace McDonald leads with a 2.60 ERA, which is absolutely insane. In summary, the Dynamos are really, really good at baseball. But again, they really can't get complacent. They're tied for 3rd in the playoffs and are 2 games out of 5th, so they really have to keep their head down and push. The final advantage holder is the Anchorage Wheelers. The team has a lot of minors veterans, such as Will Fisher, who some suspect is doing performance-enhancing drugs, a cardboard cutout of Derek Jeter, and even Dayton Mack, who are all performing pretty well. But we mustn't forget about the new wheelie boys, like Armando Velasquez and Busta Baxter, and even the second-year guys like Perry Hodder and Hunt Catsup are contributing greatly. It's a great team, and the Wheelers now have a legit chance at making a World Series run. But again, complacency is the biggest curse of them all for a team like the Wheelers. They cannot get comfortable with the position they are in until they know that a playoff spot is in the bag. Now we get to the 2 teams that have a pretty good chance of making into the playoffs based on their current situation, the outsiders. Let's start off with the Season 23 MIL PBE champions, the Amarillo Armadillos, who are 2 games back from the Wheelers and the Dynamos. They have a pretty decent roster. Its top performances are mostly MIL PBE vets, much like the Wheelers, such as Dan King, Steve Rogers, and Spakak. Haha, funny word. But of course, there are some solid rooks like Adam Malott pulling their weight as well. And there are very little changes from their Season 23 championship winning roster. Overall, the team definitely still has a chance of making the playoffs and is very much still in the hunt. So the Dillos shouldn't give up. And finally, just 1 game back of the Dillos is the Kansas City Hepcats. Now, much like the Dillos, the Hepcats roster hasn't really changed much since Season 23. Only 3 players were called up last season, but the ones who weren't called up are doing pretty well. Returning players like We Dem Boys, Junichi Kaneda, Tommy Caruso, and Kiwi Mace are doing pretty decent for the Hepcats. Not to mention the new rookies in Maverick Smoltz, Brian Benz, and Jack Brady, who are all doing pretty well for their first season in the league. The team is consistent and has good performance, but it's just a matter of whether the Hepcats can push through or fall at the finish line. Now, that's about it for me. Enjoy the action-packed Minors playoff race that is going to come, and have a good day or evening or whatever. Bye.
Thank you again, Sam. Excellent stuff. Always anchoring down the minor league. A very important piece of PBE is that minor league, and actually I think a lot of us had some of our fondest memories in that minor league. It was always exciting each year just because of the constant changing and stuff going around. So join us each week as Sam breaks down the minor leagues here in the PBE and brings us all exciting news and notes each week. I've been Io Torn. With me this week has been Sam, Geronimo Shiderme, and of course the newcomer, The Bill, who will be bringing exciting stuff each week. So thanks for joining us again this week. We got a couple of exciting games this week moving into the playoff push, and we will see who will rise to the top of the PBE to fight for a Season 24 championship. Thank you again. Join us next week. This has been Io Torrance signing off. This has been the PBE Rewind team. Thanks again. Have a good evening.